The Crown That Chose Her. Chapter 1. The Selection. The dust motes danced in the light streaming through the archive windows, and Elara sneezed for the third time that morning. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of ancient ink across her freckled cheek, and returned to the manuscript before her. Chronicle of the Starfall Dynasty, Volume 14. Boring as dried bread, but someone had to catalog it. At 23, Elara had spent 5 years in the royal archives of Aeloria, surrounded by the smell of parchment and the whisper of turning pages. It was a good life for a girl from the lower merchant quarter. Steady work, a small room in the palace servants' wing, and all the books she could read. Her mother had been so proud when she'd earned the position. "Elara!" The voice of Master Theron, the head archivist, echoed through the stacks. "You're wanted in the Hall of Ascension, immediately." She looked up, startled. The Hall of Ascension? That made no sense. Today was the choosing ceremony, when Princess Cassia would finally approach the crown on her 20th birthday. Every noble-born child in the kingdom dreamed of being chosen, but only those of royal blood were permitted to try. "There must be some mistake," Elara called back. "No mistake. The steward himself came, said you're required to attend. All palace staff." Elara set down her quill with a frown. She'd planned to avoid the ceremony entirely. Court politics gave her hives, and the thought of watching Princess Cassia, beautiful, imperious Cassia, ascend to power made her stomach turn. But orders were orders. She made her way through the winding corridors of Whitestone Palace, joining the stream of servants and minor courtiers flowing toward the Hall of Ascension. The great doors stood open, revealing a space packed with hundreds of people, all dressed in their finest. Elara tugged at her simple gray dress, suddenly conscious of the ink stains on her sleeves. The hall thrummed with anticipation. At the far end, on its pillar of black stone, the crown waited. Even from this distance, Elara could feel it. A pressure behind her eyes, a humming in her blood. She'd never been this close to it before. Princess Cassia stood at the base of the pillar, resplendent in cloth of gold, her dark hair wound with pearls. The high priest droned through the traditional blessings while the princess waited, her beautiful face serene. She looked like she'd been born to wear that crown. Behind the princess, half hidden in shadow, stood a man Elara didn't recognize. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell to his collar and a face too sharp to be called handsome. He wore the black and silver of the royal guard, but something about him seemed wrong. The way he stood too still, the way his gray eyes swept the crowd with the wariness of a wolf. Those eyes found hers, and Elara's breath caught. For a moment, the noise of the hall faded. There was something in that gaze, perhaps recognition or warning. Then he looked away, and the spell broke. The high priest finished his benediction. The crowd fell silent. Princess Cassia began to climb the 13 steps to the crown. Each step was a ritual, a test. The crown judged not just blood, but worthiness, strength of will, clarity of purpose, the ineffable quality the ancient texts called sovereignty. Cassia climbed with perfect grace, her head held high. When she reached the 13th step, she extended her hands toward the crown. The crown did nothing. Cassia waited, her smile never faltering, but Elara could see the tension in her shoulders. The seconds stretched. The crowd began to murmur. Still the crown sat, cold and dormant. After a full minute, the high priest cleared his throat. "Perhaps your highness might try again."
Cassia's hands trembled as she reached once more. Nothing. No light, no response, no recognition. The crown rejected her as it had rejected every other hopeful for 3 centuries. The murmurs grew louder. This wasn't supposed to happen. The astrologers had been certain. Cassia was meant to rule, born under the constellation of the lion, daughter of a king. How could the crown refuse her? Elara felt it before she understood it, a pull like a hook behind her navel, dragging her forward. Her feet moved without her permission. No, this was absurd, this was wrong, she was nobody, just a girl who liked books too much and sneezed at dust. But her body didn't care what her mind thought. She pushed through the crowd, driven by that inexorable pull. People gasped and pointed. The guard in black and silver stepped forward, his hand moving to his sword, but something stopped him. His eyes widened as he recognized what was happening. "Stop her!" someone shouted, but it was too late. Elara climbed the steps. Each one sent a jolt of rightness through her body, a feeling of puzzle pieces sliding into place. She didn't want this, she'd never wanted anything less. But the crown wanted her. On the 13th step, she stood before it. This close, she could see the intricate working of the silver, the way the moonstones seemed to hold tiny galaxies within them. It sang to her, a frequency only she could hear. Princess Cassia stood frozen, her face a mask of shock and fury. "This is impossible," she whispered. Elara reached out with shaking hands. The moment her fingers touched the silver, light exploded through the hall. The crown leapt to her head of its own accord, and Elara Veylin, archivist, daughter of no one important, screamed as 3 centuries of memories crashed into her mind. She saw every king and queen who had worn the crown, felt their triumphs and failures, their loves and losses. She saw the land itself, the mountains and rivers, the cities and farms, every beating heart in Aeloria connected to her through threads of light. The weight of it was crushing, magnificent, impossible. When the light faded, she stood alone on the pillar, the crown of Aeloria burning cold against her brow. The hall erupted in chaos. And through it all, the man in black and silver watched her with those wolf-gray eyes, and something in his expression might have been pity. Chapter 2. The Exiled Prince. They locked her in the royal chambers, which was perhaps the politest imprisonment Elara had ever heard of. The rooms were vast and luxurious, all velvet and goldwork, in windows that overlooked the palace gardens. It would have been beautiful if it wasn't effectively a prisoner. The crown sat on her head, immovable. She'd tried to remove it a dozen times in the first hour, yanking at it until her scalp ached, but it might as well have been part of her skull. It whispered to her constantly, fragments of memory, pieces of knowledge she shouldn't possess. She knew without being told that 300 years ago the crown had been forged by the archmage Kellis to prevent weak kings from destroying the realm. It would choose only those truly meant to rule, regardless of birth. It had not chosen in so long because no one worthy had tried. Until her. She wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. A knock at the door made her jump. She expected servants, or perhaps the high priest coming to try some ritual of removal. Instead, the man from the hall entered, still dressed in the black and silver of the guard. Up close, he was even more imposing, over 6 feet tall, with the build of someone who spent more time with a sword than a pen. His dark hair was military short on the sides, longer on top, and a thin scar cut through his left eyebrow. He bowed, the gesture stiff. "Your Majesty." The title flinched her. "Don't call me that." The crown would disagree.
"The crown is insane." She paced to the window, her simple dress feeling absurdly out of place amid all this finery. "There's been a mistake. I'm nobody. I catalog books. I can't." She gestured helplessly at the crown. "The crown doesn't make mistakes." His voice was deep, roughened by something. Smoke, perhaps, or screaming. "I'm Theron Ashenblade. I've been assigned as your personal guard." Ashenblade. The name tickled something in her memory. Not her memory, the crown's memory. "You're the exiled prince." His jaw tightened. "I was." Now she understood the wrongness she'd sensed in him. Theron Ashenblade, firstborn son of King Aldrich, heir to the throne. 10 years ago, he'd been accused of murdering his younger brother and banished from Aeloria on pain of death. The crown remembered the trial, remembered the evidence, circumstantial but damning, remembered Aldrich's grief as he cast out his own son. "Why are you here? Exile means death if you return. King Aldrich is dead. He fell ill 3 months ago and passed in his sleep. Theron's expression revealed nothing. Princess Cassia recalled me under conditional pardon. I'm to serve the crown, whoever wears it, or face execution. So you're my jailer. I'm your guard. There's a difference. Is there? She turned to face him fully. Cassia expected to be chosen. Now I wear her crown. You think she'll just accept that? You think any of them will? No, he said simply, which is why you need me alive. I may be an exile and a kinslayer, but I know this court. I know it's poison. The word kinslayer hung between them, heavy with accusation. Elara studied him, trying to reconcile what she saw with what the crown told her. The man before her held himself like someone carrying a great weight, but there was no cruelty in his face, only a deep and terrible weariness. Did you kill your brother? Does it matter? It does to me. He held her gaze for a long moment. No, but I couldn't prove my innocence, so here we are. He moved to the door, his hand on the latch. You should rest. Tomorrow the High Council convenes to decide what to do about you. It won't be pleasant. Wait. Elara caught his arm without thinking. The contact sent a shock through her. Not magical, just the simple warmth of human skin. She released him quickly. Why did you look at me that way? In the hall, before the crown shows. You saw something. Theron's expression softened, just slightly. I saw someone about to have their life destroyed. I know the look. I've worn it myself. He left her then, the door closing with a soft click. Elara sank onto the impossibly soft bed, the crown cold against her temples, and wondered if she had just been given a guard or a fellow prisoner.
Chapter 3. The High Council. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. High vaulted ceilings, walls lined with portraits of stern monarchs, a horseshoe table where 12 of the most powerful nobles in Aeloria sat in judgment. Elara walked between them to the lone chair at the center, acutely aware that she wore borrowed finery, a blue gown that didn't quite fit, shoes that pinched her toes. The crown, at least, fit perfectly. Theron stood behind her, a silent presence in his guard uniform. She was grateful for him, though she'd never admit it aloud. Lord Chancellor Marius spoke first, his reedy voice echoing. Lady Veylin, or should we say, Your Majesty? The honorific dripped with sarcasm. The council has convened to address this irregularity. Irregularity? Elara kept her voice steady despite her hammering heart. The crown chose. That's how it works. The crown chooses from royal blood, snapped Duchess Ravenna, a hawk-faced woman in crimson silk. You are a commoner, an archivist. This is unprecedented. So was a crown that refused to choose for 300 years, Elara countered. The crown fed her confidence, whispering of ancient precedents, of times when shepherds and soldiers had been called to rule. The crown's purpose is to select who should lead, not who we think deserves to lead. Blood doesn't determine worthiness. Heresy, someone muttered. Princess Cassia sat at the far end of the table, beautiful and cold as winter. Perhaps the crown has been damaged. 3 centuries is a long time. It may be confused. Convenient reasoning, Theron said quietly. Every head turned toward him. The crown rejected you, princess. That's not confusion. That's judgment. Cassia's eyes flashed with fury. The exile dares speak? You murdered your brother, Ashenblade. Your judgment is worth less than nothing. Alleged murder, Elara said, surprising herself. He was never proven guilty. He was exiled. By a grieving father who needed someone to blame. The words came from the crown's memories, from Aldrich's own tortured thoughts. King Aldrich knew, in his heart, that the evidence was circumstantial, but his younger son was dead, and the realm demanded justice. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Lord Chancellor Marius pounded his gavel, calling for order. When the noise subsided, he fixed Elara with a cold stare. Even if we accept the crown's choice, which remains in question,
You lack the education, the training, the connections necessary to rule. You would be a puppet, controlled by whoever whispered loudest in your ear." "Then teach me," Elara said. "Give me advisors. Isn't that what a council is for?" "It's not that simple," said Lord Bastian, Master of Coin. "There are factions at court who will never accept a low-born queen. They'll see this as an opportunity to seize power. We could be looking at civil war." The words chilled her. Civil war. Death and destruction because she'd touched a crown she'd never wanted. Elara felt the weight of it crushing down on her shoulders. "There is another option," Cassia said, her voice honey-sweet. "Lady Veylin could abdicate, renounce her claim, and I will take the crown. The realm would be stable. No blood need be shed." "Can she even do that?" Duchess Ravenna asked. "Can the crown be transferred?" "Unknown," Marius admitted. "It's never been attempted." Elara felt the crown's response immediately, a sharp, angry pulse. It showed her images, weak kings who had tried to give up the crown to avoid responsibility, who had been struck down by the power. The crown was not a burden to be shirked. Once chosen, you ruled or you died.
"I can't abdicate," she said softly. "The crown won't allow it." Cash's expression darkened. "How convenient." "It's the truth. I didn't ask for this, princess, but I won't die to make things easier for the rest of you." "Then what do you propose?" Marius demanded. "How do we prevent the realm from tearing itself apart?" Elara looked around the table, at 12 faces ranging from hostile to merely skeptical. These were people who'd spent their lives preparing to serve a royal court, who understood power in ways she never would. But the crown gave her something they lacked, the memory of every crisis Aeloria had ever faced, every solution that had worked or failed. "We prove I can rule," she said. "Give me 1 month. Let me learn. Let me show the realm I'm not just some girl with a magical accident on her head. If at the end of that month the crown still refuses to transfer, then we'll address succession another way. But give me a chance." "And what happens in that month?" Lord Bastian asked. "While you're learning which fork to use, who governs?" "The council," Elara said, "as you always have. I'll observe, I'll learn, and I'll earn the right to lead, but I won't be pushed aside without trying." Silence fell. The council members exchanged glances, conducting negotiations in looks and subtle nods. Finally, Marius sighed. "1 month," he said. "But you'll be watched, Lady Veylin, closely. One mistake, one hint that you're manipulable or weak, and we'll revisit this conversation." "Agreed." As the council dispersed, Elara felt a hand on her shoulder. Theron leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "That was well done, but you've made enemies today." "I made enemies the moment the crown shows me." "True, but now they know you're not helpless." His hand lingered a moment longer than necessary. "Come, you have lessons to begin, and I have guard duties to attend to. Try not to start any more political fires before dinner." Despite everything, Elara smiled. Chapter 4. Lessons in Power. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of etiquette lessons, policy briefings, and endless meetings. Elara woke before dawn to study with the Master of Protocol, learning the 1,000 tiny rules that governed court life, which nobles to greet first, how deeply to bow, the meaning behind every gesture and gift. Her brain, accustomed to cataloging manuscripts, absorbed it all with desperate intensity. Theron was always there, a shadow at her back, silent and watchful. At first, his presence unnerved her, but as the days passed, she found comfort in his steadiness. While everyone else at court approached her with calculation or barely concealed hostility, Theron simply was. He did his duty, protected her from overeager courtiers and subtle threats, and asked nothing in return. On the 5th day, she finally asked him about it. They were in the palace gardens, one of the few places she could escape the suffocating formality of the royal chambers. Theron had insisted on accompanying her, of course, but at least he kept a respectful distance as she walked among the roses. "Why are you really here?" she asked, not looking at him. I know Casher recalled you under pardon, but you could have refused. Exile in a foreign land would be better than serving the woman who stole the crown you were meant to wear. You didn't steal anything. The crown chose you. That's not an answer. She heard him exhale, a sound caught between frustration and something softer. My brother died 10 years ago, murdered in his bed, poison in his wine. I was the last person to see him alive. We'd argued that evening about something stupid, I don't even remember what. When the guards found him the next morning, everyone assumed I'd killed him. But you didn't.
No, I loved Mikhail. He was 15 years old, and he believed in honor and justice with the fervor only the young can manage. He was going to be a better king than I ever would have been. Theron's voice roughened. But someone killed him, and they let me take the blame. For 10 years, I've lived in exile, wondering who the real murderer was, why they did it, and whether they're still here, at court, walking free while I rotted. Elara turned to face him. In the garden light, she could see the lines pain had carved around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched when he spoke of his brother. You came back to find the truth, and to see Cassia crowned. I thought if I could serve the realm one last time, protect the new monarch, maybe I could find some small redemption. But the crown chose you instead. He met her eyes. I don't know what that means, Elara. I don't know if it's fate or chance or some cosmic joke, but you're here, and you're trying despite being terrified, and that deserves protection. It was the first time he'd used her given name. The intimacy of it sent warmth through her chest. I am terrified, she admitted. Every night I dream I'll wake up and the crown will be gone, and I'll just be Elara again. But every morning it's still there, and the longer I wear it, the more I feel connected to the land, to the people. I feel every heartbeat in Aeloria, Theron, every joy, every pain. How did your ancestors bear it? They didn't always. Some went mad. Others became tyrants, trying to control what they felt. The good ones, he hesitated. They found people to help carry the burden. They didn't rule alone. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Before Elara could respond, a servant appeared at the garden entrance, bowing low. Your Majesty, the trade minister requests an audience. There's a dispute with the eastern merchants that requires your attention. Elara sighed. Of course there is. She glanced at Theron. Will you sit in on the meeting? I could use someone who isn't trying to manipulate me. That's literally my job. You know what I mean. His lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Yes, Your Majesty, I'll attend. As they walked back toward the palace, Elara felt the crown pulse with approval. It liked Theron, she realized, trusted him in a way it didn't trust anyone else at court. The crown's judgment was usually sound. It had chosen her after all, despite everything. But this felt different, more personal. She was in dangerous territory, she knew, growing to trust her guard, to value his presence beyond mere duty. In the political snake pit of the palace, trust was a weapon that could be used against you. But as Theron held the door for her, his hand briefly touching the small of her back to guide her through, Elara couldn't bring herself to care about the danger. Some risks were worth taking. Chapter 5. The First Threat. The attempt on her life came on the 12th night. Elara was in her chambers, reviewing tax documents by candlelight, riveting reading, but necessary if she wanted to understand the kingdom's financial situation. Theron stood by the door, theoretically at attention, but actually reading a book he'd borrowed from her. She'd learned he had a weakness for adventure novels, which seemed at odds with his grim exterior, but somehow fit perfectly. The assassin came through the window. He was silent as shadow, dressed in black, a curved blade in each hand. Elara had perhaps half a second to register his presence before he lunged, but Theron moved faster. He threw himself between Elara and the assassin, his sword somehow already drawn. Steel rang against steel.
The assassin was skilled, Elara could see that even in her panic, but Theron fought with the desperate efficiency of someone who'd spent years surviving against the odds. They clashed across the room, shattering a vase, sending papers flying. Elara scrambled backwards, her heart hammering. The crown burned ice-cold against her skull, feeding her information she didn't want. This was a professional killer, hired by someone at court, someone who wanted her dead before she could consolidate power. The assassin feinted left, then slashed right. Theron barely blocked, the blade opening a thin line across his forearm. He didn't flinch, just drove forward with a sequence of attacks that forced the assassin back toward the window. Then the assassin did something unexpected. He grabbed a handful of powder from his belt and threw it at Theron's face. Theron jerked back, blinded, and the assassin's blade came up, aiming for his throat. Elara didn't think. She grabbed the heavy bronze candlestick from her desk and swung with all her strength. The candlestick connected with the assassin's skull with a sickening crack. He dropped like a stone. For a moment, the room was utterly silent except for their ragged breathing. Then Theron wiped his streaming eyes, blinked until he could see, and looked at the unconscious assassin. "Well," he said, "that's one way to handle it." Elara dropped the candlestick, her hands shaking. "Is he dead?" "No, unconscious." Theron crouched beside the man, checking for concealed weapons, though he'll have a hell of a headache when he wakes. He found a small medallion around the assassin's neck and held it up to the light. His expression darkened. "Shadow mark, professional guild. Someone paid a fortune for this." "Who?" "That's what we're going to find out." He stood, moving to the door and calling for the guards. As soldiers flooded the room, securing the assassin and checking the windows, Theron returned to Elara. His arm was still bleeding, a slow trickle that stained his sleeve. "Are you hurt?" "No, you're the one who's bleeding." "It's shallow. I've had worse." But when he tried to tear his strip from his shirt to bind it, his hands shook slightly. Elara caught his wrist, stilling the movement. "Let me." She found the medical kit kept in the royal chambers. Apparently, attempted assassination was common enough to require preparation, and cleaned the wound with steady hands. It wasn't deep, as he'd said, but it was long and would scar. She bound it carefully, aware of the warmth of his skin under her fingers, the way his breathing hitched slightly when she touched him. "You could have died," she said quietly. "I could have, but I didn't." "Why did you do that? Throw yourself in front of him?" Theron looked at her with those gray eyes that saw too much. "Because protecting you isn't just my duty, Elara. It's my choice." The admission hung between them, raw and dangerous. Elara's fingers stilled on the bandage. She should step back, should re-establish the professional distance between queen and guard, but she didn't want to. For 12 days, she'd been learning to be something she wasn't, regal, distant, controlled. With Theron, she could just be herself, frightened and stubborn and trying so damn hard not to fail. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered. "I'm playing at being queen, but tonight proved I can't even protect myself. How can I protect a kingdom?" "You saved my life tonight. That candlestick strike was perfect. If you'd hesitated a second longer, I'd be dead. You don't give yourself enough credit." "I got lucky." "No. You saw what needed to be done, and you did it. That's not luck, Elara. That's courage." He caught her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. "You're gonna make a good queen, not because you were born to it, but because you're willing to learn, willing to fight." The touch sent electricity racing up her arm. They were too close, she realized. Close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. This was forbidden territory, a queen and her guard, power and duty tangled with something far more dangerous. She should pull away. She should remember that every person at court was watching for any sign of weakness, any leverage they could use against her. Instead, she squeezed his hand, just once, just for a moment. Then she stepped back, letting cool air rush between them. "Thank you," she said, "for protecting me, for believing in me." "Always," Theron said. and the word felt like a promise. The captain of the guard appeared in the doorway, saluting. "Your Majesty, we've secured the prisoner. What are your orders?" Elara straightened, feeling the crown settle more firmly on her brow. Time to be a queen again. "Take him to the cells. I want to know who hired him, and I want to know by morning. Use whatever methods you deem necessary." The words tasted like ash, but the crown approved. Sometimes mercy was weakness. "Yes, Your Majesty." As the guards hauled the assassin away, Elara moved to the window he'd entered through. 4 stories up, smooth stone, no handholds, an impossible climb, unless you had help from inside the palace. "Someone let him in," she said. "Someone who knows the palace layout, who could disable the wards on my chambers." "Someone close to you," Theron agreed. "The question is who." Elara thought of Princess Cassia's cold fury in the council chamber, of the hostile nobles who wanted her gone. Too many suspects, too many people who would benefit from her death. "We need to be smarter, more careful. If they tried once, they'll try again." "Agreed. I'll post additional guards outside your door, and—" he hesitated. "I should stay in your chambers, on watch." Heat flooded her cheeks. "That wouldn't be proper." "Neither is getting murdered in your sleep." He had a point. Elara weighed propriety against survival and found survival considerably more appealing. "Fine, but you sleep in the sitting room, not—" she gestured vaguely at the bedroom. "Understood." His lips quirked. "I'm a perfect gentleman, Your Majesty." "Somehow I doubt that." They cleaned up the aftermath of the fight, broken glass, scattered papers, bloodstains that servants would have to scrub out tomorrow, all evidence of how close she'd come to dying. As Elara worked, the crown whispered to her of other assassination attempts throughout Aeloria's history, other monarchs who'd survived or fallen. It was meant to be reassuring, she thought. Instead, it just reminded her how dangerous this game was. When everything was restored to some semblance of order, Theron made himself comfortable in a chair by the sitting room door, his sword across his lap. Elara retreated to her bedroom, but left the door cracked open. She could see him from her bed, a silent guardian keeping watch while she tried to sleep. She didn't expect to manage it, but the crown had other ideas. The moment her head hit the pillow, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and she tumbled into darkness. She dreamed of a boy with Theron's eyes, laughing as he sparred in the training yard. Mikkel, she knew somehow. Theron's brother. He was so young, so alive, so full of promise. Then the dream shifted, and she saw him in his bed, pale and still, poison spreading through his veins like ink in water. Someone had killed him, someone who was still here, still plotting, and the crown wanted her to find out who.
Chapter 6. The Interrogation. The prisoner didn't talk. Elara stood in the cells beneath the palace, watching through a barred window as the captain of the guard tried various methods of persuasion. The assassin, they learned his name was Corell, remained stubbornly silent, even when the pain grew severe. He was a professional in every sense. "He's been trained to resist torture," Theron said beside her. "Shadowmark training is extensive. He won't break, no matter what they do to him." "Then we're wasting time and causing suffering for nothing." Elara's stomach turned at the sounds coming from the interrogation room. The crown approved of harsh measures, but Elara herself couldn't watch without feeling sick. "Stop this." "Your Majesty!" "I said stop." The captain emerged, looking frustrated. "He won't talk. We can continue, try different methods." "No, I'll speak to him myself." Both Theron and the captain objected immediately, but Elara overrode them. She had an idea, something the crown had whispered to her. It was risky, potentially stupid, but traditional methods weren't working. She entered the interrogation room alone. Corell sat chained to a chair, his face bloody but his eyes still defiant. When he saw her, surprise flickered across his features. "Your Majesty," he said mockingly, "come to watch?" "No, come to offer you a deal." Elara pulled up a chair and sat across from him, ignoring the blood on the floor. "You're going to die. We both know that. The question is whether you die for nothing or whether you die having accomplished something." "I don't talk." "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to think." She leaned forward. "Someone hired you to kill me. Someone who doesn't care that you'll die in the attempt. You're a tool to them, disposable. But to me, you're a human being who made a choice. A wrong choice, but still a choice." "Touching. I'm not interested in your mercy." "Not mercy, information. See, here's what I'm offering. You don't tell me who hired you, but you tell me why. Was it political, personal, financial? Just give me that much, and I'll make sure your family, if you have one, receives a pension. 100 gold royals, paid annually for the next 20 years. Corell's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of playing this game blind. I need to understand my enemies, and you're the closest thing I have to a source." She stood. "Think about it. You have until dawn to decide. Tell the guards if you accept." She left him there, chained and bleeding, and returned to the corridor where Theron waited. "That was either brilliant or insane," he said. "Possibly both." They waited 3 hours. Just before dawn, the captain sent word. Corell wanted to talk. Elara returned to the cell, Theron shadowing her. The assassin looked worse than before, exhaustion adding to his injuries, but his eyes were clearer, more focused. "I accept your deal," he said without preamble. 100 gold royals to my sister. She lives in the merchant quarter, runs a bakery. She doesn't know what I do for a living." "You have my word. The money will be delivered. Now tell me why someone wanted me dead." Corell was silent for a long moment. Then, "It wasn't personal, wasn't even about you specifically. It was about preventing stability." "Explain." "The realm has been without a true monarch for 300 years. The council rules, but they're fractured, constantly fighting for advantage. That chaos benefits certain people, merchants who profit from instability, nobles who've carved out independent power bases. Your coronation threatens all of that. If you succeed, if you actually unite the realm under the crown again, a lot of powerful people lose their influence." "So this was hired by a coalition? Multiple people?"
I don't know the specifics. Shadowmark doesn't ask questions, but the contract came through intermediaries, and the payment was substantial, enough to suggest multiple backers. He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. "I can tell you this, you're not the only target. Anyone who might stabilize the realm is in danger, including him." He nodded toward Theron. Elara's blood went cold. "Why Theron?" "Because he's the spare heir. If you die and Princess Cassia can't claim the crown, it might choose him. Some factions can't allow that. He's too competent, too dangerous. Better to eliminate all possibilities and keep the chaos going." Theron's expression remained neutral, but Elara saw his hand tighten on his sword hilt. "Is there anything else you can tell me? Anything that might help identify who's behind this?" "Only that they're patient. This has been planned for months, maybe years. They were ready for whoever the crown chose." Corell met her eyes. "You're walking into a trap, Your Majesty, one that was set long before you touched that crown." "Then I'll just have to spring it carefully." Back in her chambers, Elara paced while Theron watched from his chair. The morning sun streamed through the windows, highlighting the exhaustion they both felt. "It makes sense," Theron said finally. "For 3 centuries, the Council has ruled Aeloria as a collective. Some members have become incredibly powerful. They have their own armies, their own territories. A true monarch threatens all of that. But they can't just murder every person the crown chooses. No, but they can create enough chaos and fear that the crown appears cursed, make people believe that wearing it brings only death. Eventually, no one would dare try, and the council remains in control. Elara sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. The crown pulsed against her temples, feeding her information about historical power struggles, noble families with grudges spanning generations, the complex web of alliances that made up the court. It was too much, too complicated. "I don't know how to fight this," she admitted. "I'm one woman against, what, dozens of conspirators? Hundreds? How do I even know who to trust?" Theron crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. "You start small. You find one ally you can trust absolutely. Then you build from there." "And who's my one ally? You? If you'll have me." The words were simple, but the weight behind them was enormous. He was offering her more than protection. He was offering her partnership, loyalty, everything he had. It terrified her how much she wanted to accept. "You realize this might get you killed," she said softly. "I've been living on borrowed time for 10 years. If I'm going to die, I'd rather it be for something that matters." She reached out, her fingers brushing the scar that cut through his eyebrow. He went very still at the touch, his breath catching. This close, she could see the gray in his eyes was streaked with blue, like storm clouds. "When did this happen?" she asked, tracing the scar. "The night Mikhail died, I heard him cry out, ran to his room. Someone was leaving through the window. I tried to stop them and they hit me with something. When I woke, Mikhail was dead and the guards were arresting me. I never saw the killer's face. The real murderer is still here, still free. Yes, and I think they're part of this conspiracy. Mikhail's death destabilized the succession, made the realm weaker. It fits the pattern." Elara's hand fell to his shoulder, needing the contact, the reminder that he was real and solid in here. "We'll find them. Whoever killed your brother, whoever's trying to kill me now, we'll expose them. Together? Together." The word felt like a vow. Theron's hand came up to cover hers, his calloused palm warm against her fingers. They stayed like that for a long moment, balanced on the edge of something neither dared name. Then a knock at the door shattered the moment. Theron rose smoothly, his professional mask sliding back into place as he answered. It was a servant, bearing an invitation. "Your Majesty, Princess Cassia requests your presence at a private dinner this evening. She wishes to discuss the future of the realm." Elara and Theron exchanged glances. This could be a trap, or it could be an olive branch. Either way, refusing would be seen as weakness. "I'll accept," Elara said. "I'll attend alone." "The hell you will," Theron said flatly. "The invitation specifies private. If I bring my guard, I'll insult her. If you go alone, you'll give her a chance to poison you." The servant shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing to be elsewhere. Elara dismissed him with a wave, then turned to Theron. "I have to try diplomacy first. Cassia is angry, but she's not stupid. If we can find common ground, it might split the conspiracy. Some nobles might be willing to work with me if she endorses my rule. And if she's behind the assassination attempt, then I'll need to be very, very careful." Elara touched the crown. "It warns me of danger. I'll feel if she tries anything." Theron looked like he wanted to argue further, but finally nodded. "Fine, but I'll be stationed outside the dining room. Any sign of trouble and I'm coming in." "Deal." Chapter 7. The Princess's Gambit. Princess Cassia's private chambers were exquisite, where Elara's rooms were grand but impersonal, clearly designed for function. Cassia's spaces reflected her personality, all silk and silver, tasteful art on the walls, books of poetry scattered artfully on tables. The princess herself wore a gown of deep purple, her dark hair swept up in an elaborate style.
She looked every inch the queen she'd expected to become. "Elara," she said, gesturing to a small table set for two. "Thank you for coming. I hope you don't mind the informality. I asked them to use your given name." "Not at all, Your Highness." Elara took the offered seat, hyper-aware of every detail. The wine already poured, she wouldn't drink it. The food beautifully presented, she'd eat sparingly, watching for any sign of poison. The crown hummed against her skull, alert but not alarmed. Cassia sat across from her, studying her with dark, intelligent eyes. "You're afraid of me. I'd be foolish not to. You wanted this crown. I'm wearing it. That makes us enemies by default."
"Does it?" Cassia sipped her wine. "I wondered about that, whether we must be enemies, or whether there might be another path." "What path did you have in mind?" "Partnership." Cassia set down her glass. "You have the crown's power. I have the training, the connections, the knowledge of how to rule. Together, we could give Aeloria what it needs: a stable government, strong leadership, an end to the council's infighting." It was a tempting offer. Elara could feel the logic of it. But the crown whispered warnings. Cassia was brilliant, ambitious, and used to getting what she wanted. This alliance would only last as long as it served her interests. "What would this partnership look like?" Elara asked carefully. "You remain queen in name. The crown can't transfer, so you're stuck with it regardless. But I serve as your chief advisor, your right hand. I handle the politics while you learn. Eventually, you'd have real power, but in the beginning, I'd guide you, keep you from making fatal mistakes. You'd be the power behind the throne. I'd be your greatest ally. There's a difference." Cassia leaned forward. "Elara, I'm not going to pretend I'm angry about what happened. I spent my entire life preparing to wear that crown. But I'm also not stupid enough to let personal feelings destroy the realm. We can work together, or we can tear each other apart while the kingdom burns. Which do you prefer?" Elara wanted to trust her. The offer was genuine, she could feel it. Cassia believed what she was saying. But there was something else underneath, something the crown couldn't quite identify. Not malice, exactly, more like calculation. "What about the assassination attempt?" Elara asked bluntly. Cassia blinked, surprised. "What about it?" "Did you order it?" "No," the answer came without hesitation. "I want you to succeed, Elara, or at least not to fail catastrophically. A dead queen would throw the realm into civil war, and I'd likely be blamed. That serves no one." The crown judged this truth, but truth could be complicated. Cassia might not have hired the assassin directly while still benefiting from Elara's death. "Someone at court wants me dead. Multiple someones, according to our prisoner. They're trying to destabilize the realm by preventing any true monarch from taking power. If you want partnership, I need to know, are you involved?" Cassia's expression hardened. "I'm many things, Elara. Ambitious, calculating, perhaps too prideful for my own good, but I'm not a traitor. Aeloria is my home, my legacy. I would never undermine it for personal gain." "Even if personal gain meant getting the crown?" "The crown is worthless if the kingdom it rules is ashes." Cassia stood, pacing to the window. "My father spent the last years of his life trying to hold this realm together. The council grows more fractured every year, the noble houses more independent. Without a true monarch, Aeloria will splinter into a dozen petty kingdoms within a generation. That's what I'm trying to prevent." She turned back to Elara, and for the first time her mask of perfect composure cracked. "I loved my father. I wanted to make him proud, to be the queen he believed I could be. When the crown rejected me, it felt like even magic thought I wasn't good enough. But if I can serve the realm by helping you succeed, then at least his dream doesn't die." The vulnerability was real. Elara could feel it, could see the pain behind Cassia's eyes. This was a woman who'd built her entire identity around a destiny that had been ripped away.
She was offering partnership from a place of genuine desperation, even if pride colored how she presented it. "I want to trust you," Elara said quietly, "but trust has to be earned." "Then let me earn it. Give me a chance to prove I'm sincere." "How?"
Cassia returned to the table, her expression intense. "There's a council meeting in 3 days. Lord Chancellor Marius is going to propose that you be placed under formal regency, essentially stripping you of all real power while you learn. If enough council members vote for it, you'll be a figurehead at best, a prisoner at worst. I can help you stop it." Why would they propose that now? Because you survived the assassination. They're afraid you might actually succeed, so they're moving to neutralize you politically. Marius has been gathering votes. The Crown confirmed this. It had sensed the shifting allegiances, the private meetings, the careful maneuvering. Elara had been so focused on the immediate physical threat, she'd missed the political one building in parallel. "What's your price?" she asked, "for helping me?" "Make me your high advisor, official title, real authority. Let me help you govern, and in return, I'll use my influence to protect you from the council schemes." It was still dangerous, still giving Cassia enormous power, but Elara was running out of options, and time. "I need to think about it," she said. "The vote is in 3 days. After that, it might be too late." "I understand. I'll give you my answer tomorrow." Cassia nodded, accepting this. They finished the meal in relative quiet, discussing neutral topics, the weather, the state of the palace gardens, inconsequential things. But underneath the pleasantries, both women were calculating, measuring, preparing for the battles ahead. When Elara left, Theron fell into step beside her immediately. "Well?" She offered an alliance, chief advisor in exchange for political protection. "Do you trust her?" "I don't know. The Crown says she's being honest about her motivations, but that doesn't mean she won't betray me if circumstances change." Elara rubbed her temples. "I need to know more about this regency proposal. Can you find out who's supporting it?" "I can try. I still have some contacts in the palace before my exile." "Be careful. If the conspirators realize we're investigating, they might accelerate their plans." They reached her chambers, and Elara paused at the threshold. The rooms felt cold, empty, despite their luxury. She was tired of sleeping alone, tired of carrying this burden without anyone to share it with. "Theron," she impulsively said, "stay with me tonight, not in the sitting room, here." He froze. "Elara." Don't mean, I'm not suggesting." She felt her cheeks burn. "I just don't want to be alone. I want someone I trust nearby. Please." For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then, carefully, "That would be inappropriate, dangerous even, if anyone found out." "No one will find out, and I don't care about appropriate anymore. I care about surviving the next 3 days." She met his eyes. "Please." She saw the moment his resolve broke. "All right, but I sleep on the floor." "The sofa, at least." "The floor," he insisted. "I'm your guard, Elara, not anything else." The words stung more than they should have, but she nodded, accepting the boundary he was drawing, even as part of her wanted to cross it. That night, she lay in her enormous bed while Theron made himself a nest of blankets beside her. It should have been awkward, but instead it felt right, safe. The Crown pulsed contentedly, and Elara realized it approved of him being close. "Theron?" she whispered into the darkness. "Yes." "Tell me about Mikhail. What was he like?" A long pause. Then, "He was good, genuinely good, in a way I never managed to be. He believed people were fundamentally decent, that problems could be solved with enough compassion and wisdom. He used to drive me crazy with his optimism, but..." His voice roughened. "The world was darker when he left it." "I'm sorry." "So am I." Elara reached down, her hand finding his in the darkness. He held on, his grip strong and warm, and they stayed like that until sleep finally claimed them both.
Chapter 8. Secrets in the Archive. Elara spent the next day in the royal archives, ostensibly reviewing historical precedents for regency situations, but actually researching something else entirely: the circumstances around Mikhail's death. The Crown had given her fragments, but she needed details. If Mikhail's murder was part of the larger conspiracy, then understanding it might reveal who was behind everything. The death had been ruled a poisoning, nightshade in his evening wine. The investigation had focused on Theron because he'd been alone with Mikhail shortly before his death, and because he had motive. As the older brother, he stood to inherit everything. But Elara knew the truth. Theron loved his brother. Someone else had killed Mikhail and let Theron take the blame. She pulled records from the trial, reading through testimony from servants, guards, nobles who'd been at court that night. Most of it was circumstantial. Theron had been seen arguing with Mikhail, had been found unconscious in the prince's room, had blood on his hands from the head wound. But one detail caught her attention. The wine had been delivered by a servant who disappeared the next day. A servant named Corvin Hayes. Elara cross-referenced the name, digging through employment records. Corvin had worked at the palace for 3 years before vanishing. No family on record, no known associates, no forwarding address. It was as if he'd never existed. Except he had existed, long enough to poison a prince and frame another. "You look troubled," a voice said behind her. Elara jumped, spinning to find Master Theron, the head archivist, watching her with concern. The old man had been kind to her during her years here, one of the few people who'd treated her more than just a lowly clerk. "Master Theron, I didn't hear you approach." "These old bones move quietly." He glanced at the papers spread before her. "Researching the unfortunate prince's death, are you? Morbid subject for a queen." "I'm trying to understand what happened 10 years ago. I think it connects to what's happening now." Theron moved closer, his rheumy eyes shrewd. "You think the exile is innocent." "I know he is, but I need proof." "Proof is a dangerous thing, Your Majesty, especially when it contradicts established narrative." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "I was here that night, working late, as I often do. I saw things." Elara's heart quickened. "What things?"
The servant, Corvin. He didn't just disappear. I saw him leaving the palace in the middle of the night, carrying a bag. He was met at the gate by someone in a hooded cloak. They spoke briefly, then the cloaked figure gave him something, a purse, heavy with coin by the way he handled it. Then Corvin left, and the cloaked person returned to the palace. "Did you tell anyone?" "I tried. I went to the guards the next morning, but by then the investigation had already decided Theron was guilty. No one wanted to hear about mysterious cloaked figures. It sounded like fantasy. And then..." He looked away. "Then I was told to keep quiet, strongly encouraged, if you understand my meaning." "By who?" "By someone with authority, someone who didn't want complications in the narrative." Theron met her eyes. "I've kept that secret for 10 years, Your Majesty. It's haunted me, but you're asking the right questions now, and I think you might actually be able to do something with the truth." "Can you describe the cloaked person? Anything distinctive?" "They were tall, broad-shouldered, moved like nobility, that certain confidence you can't fake. And when they pulled back their hood for a moment, I saw..." He frowned, concentrating. "A ring, heavy gold with a red stone, a seal ring." Seal rings were worn by high council members, each with their house sigil carved into the stone. "You're saying a council member paid Corvin to poison Mikhail and frame Theron?" "I'm saying someone in power orchestrated it. Whether that was a council member directly or someone working for them, I can't say." Elara's mind raced. If a council member had killed Mikhail, it meant the conspiracy went back at least a decade.
They'd been working to destabilize the monarchy long before she ever touched the crown. Master Torin, this information could get you killed. I'm 73 years old, Your Majesty. I've lived a good life. If I can help expose the truth before I die, that's enough. He patted her hand. Be careful. Whoever did this has been planning for a very long time. They won't give up easily. After he left, Elara sat among the dusty archives, her head spinning. She had a lead now, but it was dangerous knowledge. If the conspirators learned she was investigating Mikkel's death, they'd accelerate their plans. She needed to tell Theron. She found him in the training yards, working through sword forms with a borrowed blade. He moved like water, each strike flowing into the next, deadly and beautiful. Other guards watched from the sidelines, their expressions ranging from admiration to resentment. The exiled prince returned to show them all how it was done. Theron saw her approaching and immediately stopped, bowing. Your Majesty. Walk with me, she said quietly. We need to talk. They left the yards, heading for the gardens where they could speak without being overheard. Once they were alone, Elara told him everything. Corvin, the hooded figure, the seal ring. Theron listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I knew I'd been framed, but I never had proof, never had any idea who or why. His hands clenched into fists. A council member, someone I trusted, someone my father trusted, killed Mikkel and destroyed my life.
We don't know which council member yet. There are 12 of them, and any could have been involved. Then we find out. We investigate each one until we identify the killer. Carefully, Elara cautioned. If they realize we know, I don't care. His voice was hard. They killed a 15-year-old boy to advance their political agenda. They let me suffer for 10 years in exile. They tried to murder you. I'm done being careful. She caught his arm, pulling him to a stop. Theron, listen to me. I understand your anger. I feel it too. But we can't act rashly. We need evidence, not just suspicion. We need to be smart about this. How? How do we investigate 12 of the most powerful people in the kingdom without them noticing? Elara thought about it, turning the problem over in her mind. The crown whispered possibilities, ancient strategies, lessons from monarchs who'd faced similar challenges. We make them investigate each other, she said slowly. The council meeting in 3 days. Marius wants to put me under regency. What if we turn that meeting into a forum for exposing the conspiracy? We present what we know, force them to respond, watch how they react. The guilty will reveal themselves. That's incredibly risky. Everything we do is risky, but we're running out of time. If we don't act soon, they'll succeed in neutralizing me and we'll never get another chance. Theron studied her, and she saw respect in his eyes, mixed with fear. You've changed. 3 weeks ago, you were a frightened archivist who'd never been in a political fight. Now you're planning to take on the entire High Council. I had a good teacher. She squeezed his arm. And I'm tired of being afraid. They want me to fail? I'll show them what failure really looks like, for them. He smiled then, fierce and proud. My queen. The words sent warmth flooding through her, not because of the title, but because of how he said it, like she'd earned it, like he was hers in a way that had nothing to do with crowns or duty. They were standing too close again, she realized, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, see the pulse beating at his throat. His hand came up, almost unconsciously, to brush a strand of hair from her face. The touch was feather light, but it burned. Elara, he said, and her name had never sounded like that before, rough and wanting and forbidden. We shouldn't, she whispered, even as she swayed toward him. I know. It's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and Elara forgot how to breathe. They were in the garden, visible to anyone who happened to look out a window, but she couldn't bring herself to care. She'd spent 3 weeks being careful, being proper, being what everyone expected. Just for a moment, she wanted to be herself. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was supposed to be quick, just a brush of lips, but the moment they touched,
Everything changed. Theron made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair, the other wrapping around her waist. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, desperate with weeks of denied wanting. The crown blazed ice fire against her skull, and Elara felt power surge through her, the connection between monarch and champion, ruler and protector, sealed in a way that went beyond words or duty. The crown approved of this, she realized dimly. It wanted her to have someone strong at her side, someone she could trust absolutely. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theron rested his forehead against hers. "We really shouldn't have done that. Probably not. If anyone saw..." They didn't. I would have felt it. The crown had been monitoring their surroundings, keeping watch while she let herself be human for a moment. "Elara, I need you to understand something." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I care about you. More than I should, more than is wise. But you're my guard, and you're the queen. There are rules, expectations. I don't care about rules. You have to. They'll use this against you if they find out. They'll say you're being manipulated, that I'm controlling you through seduction. Everything you've built will be undermined." He was right, and she hated it, but she couldn't regret the kiss, couldn't wish it hadn't happened. So what do we do?
We're careful. We focus on surviving the next 3 days, on exposing the conspiracy. After that, he hesitated. After that, maybe we can figure out what this is between us. But right now, you need to be the queen they can't dismiss. That has to come first. It hurt, but she nodded. He was protecting her in more ways than one, from assassins, from conspirators, and from her own reckless heart. 3 days, she agreed. We survive 3 days, and then we deal with everything else. 3 days, he echoed. But as they walked back to the palace, maintaining a careful distance, Elara knew that something had shifted. Whatever happened in that council meeting, whatever came next, she and Theron were bound now. The crown had recognized him as hers, and she'd claimed him with that kiss. Let the conspirators try to use it against her. She'd show them that love could be a weapon as powerful as any crown. Chapter 9. The Council Meeting. The High Council convened at noon in the Great Chamber, all 12 members present plus Princess Cassia, who attended as a royal observer. Elara sat at the head of the table, the crown heavy on her brow, Theron standing at her right hand. She'd refused to leave him outside. Let them see her guard, let them wonder what he meant to her. Lord Chancellor Marius called the meeting to order, his expression grave. "We're here to address a matter of utmost importance, the future governance of Aeloria. Your Majesty, no one questions that the crown chose you, but choosing and ruling are different things. You lack training, experience, and, frankly, the political capital to govern effectively. Therefore, the Council proposes the following. You will remain queen in title, but a Regency Council will handle all matters of state until such time as you demonstrate sufficient competence to rule alone." "In other words," Elara said calmly, "you want to strip me of all real power and make me a figurehead. We want to ensure stable governance during your transition period." "How long would this transition period last?" Marius exchanged glances with the other council members. "That would depend on your progress. A few years, perhaps." "A few years," Elara let the words hang in the air, "during which time you would consolidate your own power, eliminate any threats to your authority, and ensure that when I finally do take control, if I ever do, I'm so weakened that I'm no real threat to your interests." "Your Majesty, that's not..." "It's exactly what's happening." Elara stood, her voice ringing through the chamber. "For 300 years, this council has ruled Aeloria without a true monarch. You've grown comfortable with that power. The thought of giving it up terrifies you. So when the crown shows someone you thought you could control or eliminate, you saw an opportunity." "This is outrageous," sputtered Duchess Ravenna. "We serve the realm." "Do you? Then explain the assassination attempt on my life. Explain why a professional killer was hired to murder me before I could consolidate power. Explain why that killer claimed he was working for people who profit from instability."
The chamber erupted in protests and denials. Elara let them rage for a moment, then held up her hand. The crown pulsed, and suddenly everyone fell silent, not because she commanded it, but because the power radiating from her demanded attention. "One of you," she said into the quiet, "or several of you, have been working to destabilize the monarchy for years. You killed Prince Mikhail 10 years ago to create chaos. You framed Theron Ashenblade to eliminate a competent heir, and now you're trying to neutralize me through political means because the physical approach failed." "These are serious accusations," Marius said coldly. "Do you have proof?" "I have a witness who saw one of you paying the servant who poisoned Mikhail, a council member with a seal ring." Now the silence was different, shocked, afraid. Every council member with a seal ring, which was most of them, looked suddenly nervous. "This is absurd," Lord Bastian said. "A witness after 10 years? Convenient." "Master Torin," Elara called. The old archivist entered, looking small and frail among all these powerful nobles, but his voice was steady as he recounted what he'd seen that night: the hooded figure, the exchange, the seal ring. "Did you see which house the ring belonged to?" Elara asked. "No, Your Majesty. The light was poor, and I was too far away to make out details. But you're certain it was a seal ring?" "Absolutely. I've worked in this palace for 50 years. I know seal rings when I see them." Princess Cassia stood abruptly. "May I speak?" Elara nodded, curious. This was the moment when Cassia would show whether her offer of alliance had been genuine.
"I've done some research of my own," Cassia said, "into the night my half-brother died, and I found something interesting in the financial records." She produced a ledger, laying it on the table. 3 days before Mikhail's death, someone withdrew 10,000 gold royals from the royal treasury. The withdrawal was authorized by a council member's signature, but the signature was forged. I've had the royal clerk verify it. "Forged by whom?" Marius demanded. "That's what we're going to find out." Cassia looked directly at Elara, and there was steel in her gaze. "Your Majesty, with your permission, I'd like to examine the seal rings of everyone in this room. If the signature was forged, it means someone made an impression of a ring that wasn't theirs. That ring will show signs of having been copied, tiny imperfections in the carving." It was brilliant, and Elara could have kissed her for it. "Permission granted. Council members, please place your rings on the table." For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, rings began appearing, gold and silver, set with rubies, emeralds, sapphires. Elara counted them, 11 rings total. One person hadn't removed theirs. Lord Chancellor Marius still wore his ring. "Your ring, Lord Chancellor," Elara said quietly. "This is preposterous. My ring has been in my family for generations." "Then you have nothing to hide by letting us examine it." Marius's hand went to his sword, but Theron was faster. His blade sang free of its scabbard, the point stopping an inch from the Chancellor's throat. "I wouldn't," Theron said softly. Time seemed to stop. Everyone stared at the tableau, the Chancellor frozen, the exile's sword at his neck, the young queen standing with her crown burning bright. "You killed my brother," Theron said, and his voice shook with rage held barely in check. "You poisoned a 15-year-old boy." "I did what was necessary," Marius said, and his voice had changed, no longer reedy and bureaucratic, but hard and cold. The monarchy had grown weak. Aldrich was old, sentimental, making decisions based on compassion instead of strength. Aeloria needed a period of council rule to stabilize, to grow strong again. Mikhail would have been like his father, soft, weak, too concerned with being loved to make hard choices. You, at least, would have been a warrior king, but you were too honorable, too bound by rules, so I removed you both. "And the conspiracy to kill me?" Elara asked. "I'm not part of that." Marius laughed, bitter and sharp. "That's the irony, Your Majesty.
I killed Mikhail to strengthen the realm through council rule, but others on this council have gotten comfortable with power. They don't want any monarch, weak or strong. They hired that assassin without my knowledge. I didn't even know about it until you survived." "Who?" Theron pressed his blade closer. "Which council members?" "I don't know. The conspiracy has fractured over the years. We're not a unified group. We're a dozen competing interests, all trying to maintain control." Marius met Elara's eyes. "You want the truth? This council is tearing itself apart. Half of us would accept a strong monarch. The other half will fight you until you're dead. And I can't tell you which is which because they won't even tell me." Elara felt the crown processing this, sorting through memories of political machinations throughout history. Marius was telling the truth, or at least the truth as he understood it. The conspiracy had grown beyond any one person's control. "Take him to the cells," she ordered. "Charge him with the murder of Prince Mikhail and high treason."
Guards moved forward to arrest Marius. As they led him away, he looked back at Theron. "For what it's worth, exile, I am sorry about your brother. He was a good boy, but I'd do it again if I thought it would save the realm." Then he was gone, and Elara was left facing 11 council members, any number of whom might be plotting her death. "Your Majesty," Duchess Ravenna said carefully, "what now?" Elara looked around the table, at faces both hostile and uncertain. The crown showed her the threads of power connecting each person, allegiances, debts, ambitions. It was a tangled mess, and she couldn't tell friend from enemy. "Now we rebuild," she said. "This council is dissolved, effective immediately. You will all submit your resignations by sunset." Chaos erupted. People shouted over each other, demanding explanations, citing precedent, threatening consequences. But Elara let the crown's power fill her, radiating outward in a wave of pure authority. "Enough!" Her voice cracked like thunder. "Aeloria has operated without a true monarch for 3 centuries. In that time, this council has grown corrupt, fractured, dangerous. Some of you serve the realm faithfully. Others serve only yourselves. I don't have time to sort out which is which, so we start fresh." "You can't dismiss the High Council," Lord Bastian protested. "It's been part of Aeloria's government since the founding." "The Crown gives me the authority to reorganize the government as I see fit. I'm using that authority. You will all submit resignations. Then, those of you who wish to continue serving may petition for new positions. I'll review each case individually and build a new council of people I can actually trust." It was a massive gamble. She was essentially declaring war on the entire political establishment. But the crown assured her it was necessary. The rot had spread too deep to cut out carefully. Better to burn it all down and rebuild. Princess Cassia stood. "Your Majesty, I formally petition to serve as your high advisor, as we discussed." Petition accepted. Princess Cassia is appointed high advisor with immediate effect. She will help me review all other applications. One by one, the council members filed out, some angry, some thoughtful, some clearly planning their next move. When they were gone, Elara sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. Theron sheathed his sword and moved to her side. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most foolish." "Probably both," she looked up at him. "Your brother's killer is in custody. Does that help?" "Yes, and no." His expression was complicated. "Justice for Mikhail doesn't bring him back, and we still don't know who else is plotting against you." One problem at a time. Elara stood, swaying slightly. The crown felt heavier than usual, as if the weight of what she'd just done was physically pressing down on her. "I need to rest, and then I need to start interviewing council members to figure out who's actually loyal. I'll take you to your chambers." As they left the council room, Cassia caught up with them. "Your Majesty, that was well played. Risky, but well played. Thank you for the support. The financial records were a perfect touch. I meant what I said about partnership.
You're stronger than I expected, Cassia smiled, but there was something calculating in it. Together, we'll make Aeloria great again. After Cassia departed, Theron murmured, Do you trust her? Enough. She wants stability, and right now that aligns with our interests, but I'm not naive enough to think she won't pursue her own agenda when it suits her. Smart. They reached her chambers. Elara dismissed the guards stationed outside. She wanted privacy, just for a moment. Inside, she finally let herself collapse onto the sofa, pulling the crown from her head for the first time in days. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. Theron sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectable distance. You did well today. I started a political war. You exposed a murderer and took control of a corrupt system. That's not nothing. She turned to look at him, this man who'd been her guard, her ally, her first kiss in a garden. His face was familiar now, every scar and angle memorized. She knew the way his jaw clenched when he was angry, the slight softening around his eyes when he allowed himself to feel hope.
"What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Between us, I mean. Not the political situation. That's a disaster and we both know it. But us, after everything that's happened." "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to say we can figure it out, that there's a future where you're queen and I'm your guard and somehow we make it work. But the reality is complicated. Love is always complicated." The word hung between them. Love. She'd said it without thinking, but once spoken, she couldn't take it back. Didn't want to. Theron's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing. "Is that what this is?" "I think so. I know it's too fast, too dangerous, too everything, but when I'm with you, I feel less alone, less terrified, like maybe I can actually do this impossible thing I've been chosen for." Elara. Her name was a prayer on his lips. "I've spent 10 years believing I didn't deserve happiness, that Mikhail's death had poisoned everything good in my life. But you make me think maybe I was wrong. Maybe there's still something worth fighting for." She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, his arm coming around her. They sat like that for a long time, just breathing together, taking comfort in proximity. 3 weeks ago, I was an archivist. My biggest worry was cataloging manuscripts correctly. Now I'm fighting conspiracies and rebuilding governments, and apparently falling in love with an exiled prince. How did this become my life? The crown chose you. The crown is insane. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. Maybe, but it chose well. A knock at the door interrupted them. They pulled apart reluctantly as a messenger entered with news. The high priest requested an audience. There were concerns about the council dissolution, questions of legitimacy, religious implications that needed addressing. "It never stops," Elara muttered. "Being queen rarely does." She stood, pulling herself together, becoming regal again. The crown went back on her head, settling into place with the familiar chill. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself, this confident woman with a crown and responsibilities and power. But Theron's reflection appeared beside hers, solid and steady, and she remembered she wasn't alone. "Let's go deal with the high priest, and after that dinner, and after that probably another crisis, but we'll handle it." "Together," Theron agreed. Chapter 10. The Ball. 3 weeks after the council dissolution, Elara stood in her chambers while servants fussed with her gown. It was a creation of midnight blue silk and silver embroidery designed to complement the crown. Tonight was the Restoration Ball, a celebration of the new era in Aelorian governance, and, more practically, a chance for Elara to assess the nobles who'd be vying for positions in her reformed council. Every major house would attend, every ambitious courtier, every merchant prince, every person with an agenda. It was a political minefield disguised as a party, and Elara's stomach churned with nerves. "Stop fidgeting," the seamstress chided. "You'll wrinkle the silk." "Sorry." Elara forced herself to stand still while they made final adjustments. The past 3 weeks had been brutal.
She'd interviewed dozens of candidates for council positions, reviewed financial records, signed proclamations, mediated disputes between noble houses. Cassia had been invaluable. Her knowledge of court politics was encyclopedic, and she'd helped Elara navigate the treacherous waters of reform. But tonight, Elara would be on display, judged by everyone who mattered. One wrong word, one political misstep, and she could undo everything she'd built. A knock sounded. "Your Majesty, your guard requests entry." "Let him in." Theron entered, then stopped dead. His eyes went wide, and for a moment he forgot to be professional. "You look—" he cleared his throat. "You look like a queen." Elara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "The gown is doing most of the work." "It's not the gown."
The servants exchanged knowing glances, and Elara shooed them out. When they were alone, she turned to Theron, suddenly self-conscious. "Is it too much? Cassia insisted on the embroidery, but I feel like a decorated cake." "It's perfect. You're perfect." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "Every noble down there is going to fall over themselves trying to curry your favor. Just remember that you don't need their approval. The crown chose you for a reason." "I wish I had your confidence." "You do. You just don't see it yet." His hand came up, almost touching her face, then dropped. They'd been careful these past weeks, maintaining professional distance in public, but in private moments like this, the attraction between them was a living thing, crackling in the air. "Theron, after the ball, I want to talk. About us, about what happens when things finally calm down." "If things calm down." "When?" she insisted. "I have to believe this gets easier eventually." "Then we'll talk, but right now you have a ball to attend and nobles to intimidate." Elara took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and let the crown settle more firmly on her head. When she looked in the mirror, she saw what Theron saw, not a frightened archivist, but a queen. It was still strange, still didn't feel entirely real, but she was learning to inhabit the role. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across marble floors. Musicians played in the gallery. Long tables groaned under elaborate dishes, and everywhere nobles, hundreds of them, dressed in their finest, all watching as Elara made her entrance. The herald's voice rang out. "Her Majesty, Queen Elara, first of her name, bearer of the living crown." Every eye turned to her. The room fell silent. For a heartbeat, Elara felt the old panic rising. Too many people, too much attention. She didn't belong here. Then the crown pulsed, flooding her with warmth and confidence. She was meant for this. She descended the grand staircase with her head high, Theron a shadow at her side, and the nobles bowed as she passed. Princess Cassia met her at the bottom, resplendent in burgundy silk. "Your Majesty, the northern houses are gathered near the windows. They're eager to discuss trade agreements. The southern contingent is by the refreshments, and they're less friendly. You'll want to approach them carefully." "Any specific threats I should know about?" "Duke Harrow is making noises about your legitimacy. Count Vex is gathering signatures for a petition demanding the old council be reinstated. And Lady Morgrave is just generally unpleasant, but nothing we can't handle." "We?" Cassia smiled. "I'm your high advisor. Your enemies are my enemies. Besides, I enjoy a good political fight." They worked the room together, Elara greeting nobles and listening to their concerns, while Cassia navigated the treacherous social currents. It was exhausting but effective. By the time the dancing began, Elara had secured tentative support from 3 major houses and neutralized 2 potential rivals. "You're a natural at this," Cassia murmured as they watched couples swirl across the floor. "I half expected you to make some catastrophic social error, but you haven't put a foot wrong." "High praise from you." "I mean it. You're becoming the queen I hoped you'd be. Strong, smart, willing to make hard choices." There was something in Cassia's tone that made Elara turn to look at her. "What aren't you telling me?" "There's a rumor circulating about you and your guard." Cassia's expression was neutral, but her eyes were sharp.
People are talking. They say he's in your chambers at night, that there's an intimacy between you. Elara's stomach dropped. It's not what they think. Isn't it? He's my guard. He protects me. From his station in your bedroom? Casey sighed. Elara, I'm not judging, but you need to understand how this looks. A low-born queen, chosen by magic, relying on an exiled prince accused of murder. Your enemies will say you're being manipulated, that he's using you to regain power. That's not true. I know, but truth doesn't matter in politics. Perception does. Elara wanted to argue, but she knew Kezia was right. She'd been careful, but clearly not careful enough. The court had noticed, and now it was becoming a liability. What do you suggest? She asked quietly. Distance yourself, publicly at least. Assign him to other duties. Take on new guards for your private chambers. Let the rumors die down. You want me to send him away? I want you to protect your reign and yourself. Kezia touched her arm. I know you care about him, but you're the queen now. Your feelings don't get to come first. Before Elara could respond, Duke Harrow approached, a massive man with a beard like a bramble bush and a voice to match. Your Majesty, a word, if you please. Elara plastered on a smile and turned to deal with him, but her mind was racing. Send Theron away? The thought made her chest tighten. He'd become essential to her, not just as a guard, but as a friend, a confidant, maybe something more. How could she function without him? But Kezia was right. Every decision she made now affected not just herself, but the entire kingdom. If keeping Theron close undermined her authority, could she really justify it? She worked through the ball in a daze, smiling and nodding and saying all the right things while internally churning. When the dancing began in earnest, she found herself at the edge of the ballroom, watching couples spin across the floor. Theron materialized beside her. You look troubled. Kezia says people are talking about us. I know, I've heard the whispers. She thinks I should distance myself from you, assign you elsewhere, end the rumors before they damage my reign. Theron was quiet for a long moment. She's probably right. The words hit like a physical blow. You agree with her? I agree that your reign matters more than my proximity to you. If I'm causing problems, then yes, maybe I should step back. He turned to face her fully. But I need you to know, if you send me away, it's not because I want to go. It's because I care enough about you to let politics matter more than what I feel. What do you feel? He glanced around, ensuring no one was close enough to overhear. I feel like I've spent 10 years in darkness, and you're the first light I've seen. I feel like protecting you has become the most important thing in my life, more important than vengeance or vindication or anything else. I feel like... He stopped himself. It doesn't matter. What matters is doing what's best for Aeloria.
And if what's best for Aeloria is you staying, is it, or is that just what you want to believe? Elara didn't have an answer. Before she could formulate one, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Guards were converging, voices rising in alarm. Theron's hand went to his sword instinctively. A messenger burst through the crowd, wild-eyed and bloodied. Your Majesty, the western border, we're under attack. The ballroom exploded into chaos. Nobles shouted questions, guards mobilized, servants scattered. Elara pushed through to the messenger, the crown already feeding her strategic information. Report, she commanded. Raiders from across the Ashmark Mountains, Your Majesty. Thousands of them. They've burned 3 villages and are moving toward the garrison at Wolfridge. The commander requests immediate reinforcement. How long until they reach Wolfridge? 2 days, maybe less. Elara's mind raced. Wolfridge was a critical defensive position. If it fell, the raiders would have a clear path to the heartland. But the garrison there was undermanned, unprepared for a major assault. Mobilize the army, she ordered. Send word to every house with military obligations. I want troops marching within the hour. Theron, assemble the officers. We need a battle plan. Your Majesty, Duke Harrow interjected. With respect, you're not a military commander.
Perhaps the council should. There is no council yet, Elara snapped, and I'm not sitting in this palace while my people are slaughtered. We're going to Wolfridge, and we're going to crush these raiders before they can establish a foothold. You can't lead an army, someone protested. You have no training. Then I'll learn quickly. She looked at Theron. You've commanded troops before. You'll advise me. Your Majesty, if you take the field, Cassia began. Then I take the field. This is what monarchs do, Cassia. They lead. Elara felt the crown's approval surging through her. This was right. This was what she was meant for, not just politics and diplomacy, but defending the realm when it mattered most. The ball dissolved into organized chaos as nobles and officers scrambled to prepare. Within an hour, Elara had traded her silk gown for armor, lighter than a man's, fitted to her frame, but still uncomfortably heavy. The crown stayed firmly on her head, visible even under a helmet. Theron helped her adjust the straps, his hands efficient and professional, but when their eyes met, she saw everything he wasn't saying. Fear for her safety, pride in her courage, the knowledge that everything was about to change. "Stay close," she said quietly. "I'm going to need you out there." "Always," he promised. They rode out at dawn with 5,000 troops, every soldier the capital could muster on short notice. More would follow, but these were the ones who would decide whether Wolfridge held or fell. As they traveled, Elara studied maps and strategy with Theron and the other officers, learning everything she could about warfare in the few days they had. The crown helped, feeding her memories of battles from throughout Aeloria. She saw cavalry charges and infantry formations, sieges and ambushes, the 1,000 small decisions that determined victory or defeat. It was overwhelming but exhilarating. She was doing something real, something that mattered. On the second night, they camped 10 miles from Wolfridge. Scouts reported the raiders had already engaged the garrison. Fighting was fierce, but the defenders were holding. Barely. "We attack at dawn," Elara decided. "Hit them from behind while they're focused on the fortress. Theron, you lead the cavalry. I'll command the center with the infantry." "You should stay in the rear," Theron argued. "It's too dangerous to—" "The crown protects me, and the troops need to see me fighting beside them. We do this together." He looked like he wanted to protest further, but finally nodded. After the strategy session ended and the other officers dispersed, he lingered at her tent. "Elara, if something happens tomorrow—" "It won't. But if it does, I need you to know—" He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "I need you to know that these past weeks have been the best of my life, even with the chaos and danger, even with everything, because I got to stand beside you while you became who you were meant to be." She reached up, cupping his face. "Nothing's going to happen. We're going to win tomorrow. Come back to the capital and figure out how to make this work. All of it. The realm, the reforms, us. I refuse to believe the crown chose me just to watch me die in my first battle." He leaned into her touch. "Promise me you'll be careful. Only if you promise the same. Deal." They stood like that for a moment, on the eve of battle, connected by touch and hope and something neither had quite named. Then Theron pulled back, professionalism reasserting itself. "Get some rest, Your Majesty. Tomorrow will be hard." After he left, Elara lay in her tent, listening to the sounds of the camp, soldiers talking quietly, horses stamping, the distant howl of wolves. The crown whispered reassurance, but she still felt the weight of what was coming. Tomorrow she would lead troops into battle for the first time. People would die because of her decisions, but people would also live because she'd chosen to act. This was what it meant to wear the crown, not just power and privilege, but responsibility and sacrifice. She finally understood why it had waited 300 years to choose someone. This burden required someone willing to carry it fully, without reservation or hesitation. Someone like her.
Chapter 11. Battle of Wolfridge. Dawn broke cold and gray over the battlefield. Elara sat on her horse beside Theron,
watching the raider army swarm around Wolfridge's walls like ants on a carcass. There were more of them than the scouts had reported, at least 8,000, maybe more. Her 5,000 soldiers suddenly seemed inadequate. "They haven't noticed us yet," Theron said quietly. "We have the element of surprise." For about 5 more minutes, Elara could feel her heart hammering, taste copper in her mouth. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to let someone more experienced handle this. But the crown burned cold against her skull, filling her with borrowed courage from 1,000 monarchs who'd faced impossible odds. She drew her sword, a beautiful blade with a moonstone in the pommel, forged specifically for her in the week since she'd announced the campaign. It felt strange in her hand, heavier than she'd expected. She'd had exactly 3 sword lessons. This was insane. "Formations ready," she asked. "Center and flanks in position. Cavalry waiting for your signal." Elara took a deep breath. The raiders had to be broken here, where they'd push deeper into Aeloria, burning and killing until the realm tore itself apart. Everything she'd fought for would mean nothing if she couldn't defend her people. "For Aeloria!" she shouted, raising her sword. The crown blazed with light, and suddenly her voice carried across the entire field, magically amplified. "For our homes, for our future, charge!" 5,000 voices roared in response. The army surged forward, a tide of steel and fury crashing toward the unsuspecting raiders. Elara rode at the center, the crown marking her as a beacon, and felt something shift inside her, the fear crystallizing into focus, into purpose. The raiders turned to face them, scrambling to reform their lines, but they were caught between a hammer and anvil, the garrison at their front, Elara's army at their back. The collision, when it came, was thunderous, brutal, overwhelming. Elara had never been in a real fight in her life, but the crown guided her, showing her where to strike, when to parry, how to read the flow of battle. Her sword found targets almost of its own accord. She cut down a raider who lunged at her horse, blocked a spear thrust, struck again and again until her arm burned and her armor was slick with blood. Around her, her guards fought like demons, keeping the worst of the fighting away from her, but she was still in the thick of it, still exposed, still very much mortal under the magic crown. A massive raider with a war axe broke through her guard line. He swung for her head, and Elara barely got her sword up in time. The impact rattled her teeth, nearly unseated her. The raider drew back for another strike. Then Theron was there, his blade taking the man in the throat. The raider fell, and Theron positioned himself between Elara and the next wave of attackers. "Stay behind me," he shouted over the din. "I'm fine. You're bleeding." She looked down, surprised to find blood streaming from a cut on her arm. She hadn't even felt it happen. "It's shallow!" The battle raged for hours. Elara lost track of time, of individual moments, of everything except the endless cycle of strike and parry and survive. The crown fed her stamina beyond natural limits, kept her in the saddle when exhaustion should have dragged her down. But even magic had its limits. Finally, the raiders broke. Their commander fell to an arrow from Wolfridge's walls, and without leadership, their discipline shattered. They scattered across the field, pursued by Aelorian cavalry. Elara sat on her trembling horse, surveying the aftermath. Bodies everywhere, raider and Aelorian alike, smoke rising from fires, the cries of the wounded. Victory, but at a terrible cost. "Your Majesty," an officer approached, saluting. "The fortress is secure. Commander Gareth requests your presence." Elara dismounted with Theron's help, her legs nearly buckling. Now that the adrenaline was fading, she felt every bruise, every strain, every moment of terror she'd pushed aside to keep fighting. They entered Wolfridge to find the garrison exhausted but jubilant. Commander Gareth, a grizzled veteran with one arm in a sling, knelt before her. "Your Majesty, you saved us. Another hour and we would have fallen." "You held the line, Commander. We just finished what you started."
Elara looked around at the battered defenders. How many did we lose? 300 dead, Your Majesty, 500 wounded. The raiders lost at least 3,000. 300 of her people dead because she'd led them into battle. The number hit her like a physical blow. These were lives she was responsible for, families that would mourn, children without parents. See that every fallen soldier receives full military honors, she said, her voice rough, and compensation for their families, triple the standard pension. They died defending the realm. They deserve to be remembered. After the official ceremonies, after tending to the wounded, after hours of decisions and duty, Elara finally returned to her tent. She dismissed her attendants, stripped off the blood-stained armor, and sat on her cot in just a simple shift, shaking. She'd killed people today, multiple people. She could still feel the resistance when her sword found flesh, still see the faces of the men who died by her hand. They'd been raiders, invaders, threats to her people, but they'd also been human beings with lives and families and reasons for fighting. The crown showed her that this was part of ruling. Sometimes you had to kill to protect. Every monarch in Aeloria's history had blood on their hands, but understanding it intellectually didn't make it easier to bear. A soft knock. "Elara, it's Theron. Can I come in?" "Yes." He entered, still in armor but with his helmet off, his face streaked with dirt and dried blood. He looked as exhausted as she felt. "You shouldn't be alone right now," he said simply.
I killed people today. I know. I was there. Does it get easier? No. It gets familiar, but not easier. Every life you take stays with you. He sat beside her on the cot, close, but not touching. But you did what you had to do. Those raiders would have slaughtered thousands if you hadn't stopped them. I know, but knowing doesn't make it feel better. They sat in silence for a while. Then Theron said, "You were magnificent today. Terrifying and brave and everything a warrior queen should be. I've never been more proud of anyone in my life. I was terrified, so was I. But you didn't let it stop you. That's what courage is." Elara finally looked at him, really looked at him. There was a new cut across his cheekbone, bruises blooming along his jaw. He'd fought like a demon today, protecting her and the soldiers around her, putting himself between her and danger over and over again. "You could have died today," she whispered. "Protecting me. That's my job. It's more than that. We both know it's more than that." Theron's gray eyes held hers. "Yes, it is." The admission hung between them, raw and undeniable. Elara reached out, her fingers tracing the new cut on his face. He went still at her touch, barely breathing. "I can't lose you," she said. "Not to battle, not to politics, not to anything. These past weeks you've become—" She struggled for words. "You've become essential. I don't know how to do this without you. You won't have to." His hand came up to cover hers against his cheek. "I'm not going anywhere, Elara. Crown or no crown, queen or no queen, I'm yours. However you'll have me, and even if it causes problems, even if the court disapproves, especially then." She leaned forward and kissed him, tasting blood and smoke and something sweeter underneath. He responded immediately, pulling her close, one hand tangling in her hair while the other wrapped around her waist. It was different from their first kiss in the garden, less desperate, more certain, like they'd both finally stopped fighting what they felt. When they broke apart, Theron rested his forehead against hers. "The court is going to lose their minds. Let them. I've faced down assassins and armies. I can handle gossip. It'll be more than gossip. They'll use this to undermine you, then I'll fight them. I'm tired of hiding what I feel, Theron. I'm tired of pretending that duty means I can't also be human." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I want you beside me, not just as my guard, but as my partner, my equal. Let everyone else figure out how to deal with it. That's not how monarchies work. Then maybe it's time for a new way." The crown pulsed in agreement, and Elara felt certainty settle over her. "The crown chose me because I'm different, because I see things differently. Maybe that includes how I approach relationships, power, everything. I'm not gonna rule like the monarchs who came before. I'm gonna rule my own way." Theron smiled, fierce and proud. "Then I'm with you. Whatever comes." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. Outside, the camp was settling down for the night, soldiers tending wounds and sharing stories of the battle. Tomorrow, they'd begin the march back to the capital, back to politics and court intrigue and all the challenges waiting there. But tonight, Elara let herself simply be, a woman in love with a man who loved her back, both of them battered and exhausted and alive against all odds. The crown hummed contentedly on the table beside them, and Elara thought she understood now why it had waited so long to choose. It hadn't been looking for someone perfect or flawless. It had been looking for someone real, someone who could be strong and vulnerable, fierce and gentle, a queen and a person all at once. Someone like her.
Epilogue, 6 months later. The new High Council convened in the rebuilt chamber, 12 members chosen for competence and loyalty rather than birth. Princess Cassia sat at Elara's right hand as High Advisor, her sharp mind invaluable in navigating the complex reforms they'd undertaken. At Elara's left stood Theron, no longer just a guard, but officially recognized as the crown's champion, with authority equal to any council member. The court had indeed lost their minds when Elara announced their relationship. There had been scandals, protests, strongly worded letters from offended nobles, but Elara had faced them all down with the same certainty she'd brought to the battlefield. The crown had chosen her. She would rule as she saw fit. Those who couldn't accept it were welcome to leave. Most had stayed. Some genuinely came to accept her unconventional approach. Others simply recognized that opposing her was futile. The crown's power was absolute, and Elara had proven she wasn't afraid to use it. "Next order of business," Elara said, pulling herself back to the present. "The trade agreement with the northern reaches. Master Colvin, your report." As the council worked through their agenda, Elara felt the familiar weight and rightness of the crown. 6 months ago, she'd been terrified of it. Now, it was part of her.